I used to think reading labels was something other people did, the kind of person who brings their own container to the grocery store and lectures you about seed oils at a barbecue. But about a year ago, I got curious for a boring reason. My stomach felt off more days than not, and a doctor told me to start looking at what I was actually eating instead of what I thought I was eating. So I started turning packages around, and what began as a mildly annoying habit turned into something closer to an obsession. And today, I want to walk you through everything I stopped buying once I actually understood what was in it, not because I think you need to panic about your pantry, but because most of us are making decisions in a grocery store based on marketing copy on the front of a box instead of the actual ingredient list on the back. And once you flip that switch, you can't really unflip it. The first thing to go was bread, and this one hurt because I love bread. But when I started reading labels, I noticed that a lot of the soft, shelf-stable sandwich bread I'd been buying for years had a dough conditioner in it that I couldn't pronounce. And when I looked it up, it turned out to be a compound also used in the production of foamed plastics and yoga mats, which is a fun fact that ruins a sandwich. And while the amount used in bread is small and regulated, the fact that a whole category of everyday bread relied on an industrial dough conditioner at all made me start asking why. And the answer is simple. It makes dough more elastic and lets factories produce loaves faster and cheaper with a longer shelf life. So I started buying bread with short ingredient lists instead. Flour, water, yeast, salt, maybe a little oil. And if I couldn't pronounce more than half the ingredients, it went back on the shelf. And the surprising part is that once you start doing this, you realize a lot of the bread marketed as wholesome. Now, I'm the kind with pictures of wheat fields and words like hearty and stone ground on the front, has almost the same list of stabilizers and preservatives as the cheap stuff. The packaging is just doing a better job of lying to you. From bread, I moved to breakfast cereal. And this is where things got a little uncomfortable because I grew up on the stuff, the cartoon mascots, the free toy, all of it. And when I actually sat down and calculated the sugar per serving on the cereals I still bought as an adult, some of them worked out to nearly a third of the box's weight being added sugar, dressed up under names like cane juice, corn syrup solids, evaporated cane juice, and malt syrup, all of which are sugar wearing a costume so that the ingredient list doesn't have the word sugar. Appear 5 times in a row, and beyond the sugar, a lot of cereals get their color from synthetic dyes that have been restricted or required to carry warning labels in other countries, but are still perfectly legal in a lot of places, which doesn't mean they're dangerous in the amounts most people eat. But it does mean that a cereal sold in one country looks completely different on a shelf in another country. Same brand, same box, different formula. And once I saw that side by side, I couldn't unsee it. So cereal got replaced with oats, plain yogurt, and eggs, foods that don't need a compliance department to explain their color palette. Then came the oils, and this was maybe the biggest shift in how I actually cook. Because for years, I just grabbed whatever vegetable oil was on sale, and it wasn't until I started digging into how those oils are actually made that I realized most refined seed oils go through a chemical extraction process involving a solvent to pull the oil out of the seed efficiently, followed by high heat processing to deodorize and stabilize it, none of which is illegal or unusual. It's standard industrial food production. But it did make me want to know more about what I was frying my eggs in, and there's genuine, ongoing scientific debate about the health effects of high omega-6 intake from these oils relative to the omega-3 fats we don't get enough of. It's not settled science. And I want to be honest about that instead of pretending doctors have unanimously banned vegetable oil, because they haven't. But a lot of physicians who study lipid metabolism have started recommending that people cook primarily with oils that require less processing, things like olive oil, avocado oil, and butter in moderation, and lean less on the heavily refined stuff for everyday cooking. And that nudged me to switch my daily cooking oil, not out of certainty, but out of caution while the research keeps developing. Which brings me to olive oil, and this is the one that made me the most paranoid. Because it turns out olive oil might be one of the most commonly adulterated food products in the entire grocery store. There have been documented cases over the years of bottles labeled extra virgin olive oil that were actually cut with cheaper, refined olive oil or other vegetable oils entirely, sometimes with added color or flavor to mask the substitution. And the label extra virgin is a quality grade, not a guarantee. It just means the oil was extracted without heat or chemicals and met certain acidity standards at the time of testing. It says nothing about whether the bottle in your hand is what it claims to be by the time it reaches a shelf on the other side of the world. Oh, I stopped buying whatever olive oil was cheapest on the shelf and started looking for bottles with a harvest date. Not just a Best By date, because a harvest date tells you the oil is actually traceable to a specific crop and season. And I started favoring oils that had a country of origin listed clearly rather than a vague label that just says packed in a particular country, which can mean the oil was blended from several different countries and bottled somewhere else entirely. It's a small habit, but it's made a real difference in how confident I feel about the bottle in my kitchen. Bottled water was next, and this one surprised me because I always assumed bottled water was the safe, neutral choice, the thing you drink when you don't trust the tap. But once I started reading into how bottled water is regulated, I learned that in a lot of places it actually faces less rigorous LO. Yes, frequent testing than municipal tap water does, and several independent studies over the past few years have found microplastic particles in the majority of bottled water brands tested, coming from the packaging and the bottling process itself, and that's on top of the enormous plastic waste footprint, so I switched to a home filter and a reusable bottle for most of my daily water. And I stopped assuming that a label with a mountain and a stream on it meant the water was cleaner than what comes out of my tap. Fast food was a different kind of education because it wasn't really about one ingredient, it was about the supply chain behind the food. The fact that a chain sells a burger for a price point at all requires cost engineering at every single step. Feed for the animals, processing, transportation, preservation, and every one of those steps introduces a shortcut that keeps the price low. And once you follow that chain all the way through, you understand why fast food tastes so consistent. No matter which city you're in, the whole system is built for uniformity and shelf life rather than for what a fresh version of that same food would actually taste like. And I'm not saying I never eat it again, but I stopped treating it as a shortcut for a real meal and started treating it as the occasional deliberate indulgence that it actually is. Organic labels were their own rabbit hole because I used to think organic meant pesticide-free, and it doesn't. It means a specific regulated list of synthetic pesticides is prohibited, but organic farms are still allowed to use certain approved natural pesticides, some of which are just as capable of affecting the environment as their synthetic counterparts. Organic also doesn't mean the food traveled less distance, doesn't mean it's more nutritious in a lab test, and doesn't mean the workers who picked it were paid fairly. It is a real, meaningful certification with real standards behind it. But it's a narrower promise than the marketing implies, and once I understood exactly what that promise covers, I stopped paying a premium for the word organic on products, where the actual difference didn't matter to me, and started reserving that spending for the specific categories where pesticide exposure is genuinely higher, like thin-skinned fruit you eat whole. Protein powder was the last one, and honestly the one that made me the angriest, because I was paying a premium for what I assumed was a clean, simple product, and independent lab testing done by consumer advocacy groups over the years has repeatedly found detectable levels of heavy metals like lead and cadmium in a meaningful percentage of protein powders tested, particularly plant-based ones, likely absorbed from the soil the source crops were grown in rather than added deliberately. And while regulatory limits exist and most products test under those thresholds, some brands consistently test higher than others. So I started looking specifically for brands that publish independent, third-party lab results for heavy metals, rather than just a vague quality seal on the tub. And I stopped buying whichever powder had the most aggressive marketing about muscle gains, and started buying the one that was willing to show its actual numbers. And when I step back and look at everything I just walked through, bread, cereal, oil, olive oil, water, fast food, organic labels, protein powder, the pattern underneath all of it is the same. The front of the package is written by a marketing team, and the back of the package is written by regulation, and those two things are not always telling you the same story. And I don't say any of this to make you scared of food. Food is not the enemy. I say it because the version of me from a couple years ago would have kept buying every single one of these products for the rest of my life without ever knowing there was anything worth questioning. And the only thing that changed that was 30 extra seconds in the aisle turning the box around. And if this video saves you those 30 seconds the next time you're standing in front of a shelf trying to decide, then it did its job. And if you want me to go deeper on any one of these categories, tell me in the comments which one, because I've genuinely got hours of notes on each of these, and I'm happy to make this a series.